Summer has gone on vacation. It's a melancholy day. The sky appears as one big pearl with no definition whatever, no hues or tones. Not even a bird dares to spread its wings for fear of drowning in this vacuum. The mighty oaks on the horizon are reaching upward as if to spank the sky for its naughtiness, while underneath the squirrels scurry about looking for a suitable place to hide their treasures of acorns, leaves, and assorted trinkets. Winter is approaching quickly. Yesterday's warm weather was just a tease of the summer past. I guess that's why they call these days of October Indian summer. I personally think that this time of year should be called Halloween summer because of all the tricks that Mother Nature plays. First, the weather gets downright nasty. Icy cold driving rainstorms with their howling thunder and shrieks of lightning awaken you in the morning. You had made plans to enjoy the day only to find the weather a direct opposite of what the so-called skilled meteorologists predicted the night before. Then, just as you feel that the rain has stopped for the day, whoosh, the sky opens its silvery velvet coat again. Secondly, Mother Nature loves to excite us with the warmth of the sun, especially at the beginning of the week. It seems that weekdays are bright, sunny, and warm, while the weekends only know drab and dreary days. When you crawl out of your cocoon on a Tuesday morning, the last thing you'd expect to see is a day just like today. Monday is the day of the week when it's supposed to feel like a funeral. Today is not the time to be attending a wake. On a morning like today, you just want to get up and shout to the world how great it is to be alive. Until the moment I discovered the neighborhood squirrel. He was lying there, motionless. His body no longer breathing the precious oxygen that we think is pure, but is full of toxins. How did he die? The closer I got to his corpse, the likelihood that he had been dead just a short time soon faded from my mind. The stench was unbearable. It reminded me of the smell of the defecated material for my dog when he goes in the house. I just wanted to gag and vomit, but I was too confused to do either. His eyes were bulging out. They reminded me of the air bubble that forms at the end of a bag when you try to squeeze the air out, but there's nowhere for the air to go. All of a sudden, I was expecting the squirrel's eyes to come bursting out like a cannon shot. His mouth was drawn back, fangs exposed as if he was snarling at an attacker. By the markings on his head, I'm pretty sure that he tried to take on a Goodyear or a Firestone. His skull protruded outward in fractional little pieces from the back of his head. Meanwhile, his legs were locked in an extended position. Maybe he had tried to leap before his demise. Nonetheless, what was once a shiny reddish-brown coat was now a patchwork of black, purple, and green decay. His stomach was bloated, suggesting that there was more than the remnants of a last meal left inside. Maybe it was a colony of maggots stuffing their little white bodies, feasting like it was Thanksgiving in Maggot World. Whatever the case may be, poor Mr. Squirrel needed a proper and decent burial. I went inside my house to fetch an old red farmer's hanky so I could cover my mouth to protect me from that awful stench while burying Mr. Squirrel. Next, I grabbed the keys to the shed off the hook on the kitchen wall and proceeded out to get a shovel. While on my way back, I wondered, should I give Mr. Squirrel a funeral service? A wake? What would I say? Maybe I could read something short from the Bible. How about Psalm 23? I finally decided to make it a short prayer. The Lord's Prayer would have to do. I didn't want to look silly praying for a dead, rotting animal as 8,000 people drove by. Then I realized I was going to have to move Mr. Squirrel in order to bury him. I just couldn't do that. Shivers ran up my spine at the thought of having to move the body of the dearly departed. Oh, how grotesque. But just as my fears had consumed me, common sense took over. I could dig a hole right next to his body and just push his body into the hole, and then I would be done with this whole mess. So I began to dig. Once the hole was completed, I began to push with the tip of my spade the body of Mr. Squirrel. What surprised me was the enormous weight this animal possessed. A frisky little rodent can't weigh more than 10 pounds. Mr. Squirrel had to be 50 pounds or better. I was so sure that this pushing would work. I didn't want to push his torso too hard for fear of bats or mice or something else that would come flying out. Using the shovel like a lever, I began to tip Mr. Squirrel into the hole. And as his body flipped over into the crater, I saw that his flesh had been eaten away far enough for some smaller rodent to feast and rest in warmth. What looked like the wispy tail of a field mouse was protruding from this gash. Inspecting this while kneeling down on one knee, I became startled when the tail seemed to move. But it was only a dead branch, too brittle to remain within Mr. Squirrel. The rigor mortis weight of the corpse became too much for the twig to act as a mainstay. Quickly, I said the prayer for Mr. Squirrel. I began to cover his body with leaves to protect him from the soil. Each shovel of dirt that I placed on him seemed to shed more light. When I emptied the last shovel of dirt over the place where his body laid, the sun shined brightly in my eyes. I looked back down towards the ground as a brisk gust of wind blew a layer of brilliantly colored leaves over the place where a moment ago was a depressing sight. In the distance, I noticed that all the leaves on the trees and bushes were a different hue. The grass was beginning to lighten and turn brown. Birds were flying southward, occasionally dipping into the river to rest or gather a drink. The wind was now a whisper of crisp air. Everything seemed to change without me realizing that it happened. I turned to go back inside my home, slowly appreciating everything in my view. This panorama I now found precious. The earth was glistening at the peak of her beauty. Mother Nature had waved her wand. A new illusion was beginning to unfold. I am getting older, maybe too old to ever experience a day like today again. When I get down on my knees to pray tonight, I'll thank God for giving me this one last chance.